Hi. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Welcome to the November 28th, 2025 Audit Committee meeting. We have a busy agenda to get through. Our first item today will be the KPMG Financial Statement Audit Plan. We'll hear a presentation on this report from KPMG, which is for information purposes only, and then we'll vote to receive the report. Next, we'll go to the draft 2026 operating and capital budgets for Audit Committee. Deputy City Treasurer Isabel Jasmine will introduce the overall budget. Then Auditor General Natalie Goujon and Deputy Auditor General Joanne Gorenstein will present the components specific to the Office of the Auditor General. After the presentation, city staff will be available to answer questions from committee members, followed by other members of council. After questions, committee will vote to receive the report and send it to council. Next, we'll consider a report from the OAG on the audit charter update. This is for information only and there is no presentation. Committee will vote to receive this report. We'll then go to the OAG's council expenses audit. Auditor General Goujon will introduce the item and hand it over to Deputy Auditor General Joanne Gorenstein and Audit Principal Rhea Khan for a presentation. The OAG will take questions after the presentation, followed by city staff. We'll vote to receive the report and send it to council. Next is the OAG's audit of the Ottawa Paramedic Service. Auditor General Goujon will introduce the item and Deputy Auditor General Gorenstein and Audit Principal Julia Weber will deliver a presentation on this report. After that presentation, the OAG will be available for questions, followed by city staff. Our last item for today is the OAG's 2026-2027 audit work plan. Auditor General Goujon will deliver a presentation on the work plan. This will be followed by questions to the OAG and city staff. Note that simultaneous interpretation is available for this meeting. All right, let's get started. So regrets, Councillor Carr has sent her regrets. And then I'll ask the committee coordinator to call the roll, please.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor Carr. Councillor Hill.
Present.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Present.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Vice Chair Hubley.
Here.
Chair Curry.
Here.
You have quorum, Chair.
Thank you. All right. So as an initial housekeeping matter, I'll ask for a motion to add the Office of the Auditor General reports to the agenda as they were distributed and published on November 27th, which was after the agenda. Vice Chair Hubley, could you please move that motion?
Being bylaw number 2025-100 to allow for consideration of these matters. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is that carried? Carried. Thank you. All right. Declaration of interest. Anyone? No, none that I've received. Confirmation of minutes. Audit Committee minutes 13, September 12, 2025. Are these minutes carried? Carried. Thank you. Item 3.2, Audit Committee confidential minutes 13, September 12th, 2025. Are these minutes carried? Carried. Thank you. Audit Committee minutes 14 from November 4th, 2025. Are these minutes carried? Carried. All right. So Finance and Corporate Services Department 2025 KPMG Financial Statement Audit Plan. And I would just like to say that this, I believe, is Andrew Newman's last meeting with us. And we are very sad. For some of us, Councillor Kavanagh and I at this committee worked with Andrew at the school board. And also I worked with Andrew on the CHIO board. And, KPMG, great reputation, but Andrew Newman, even better. So Andrew, we, like all retirements, we're happy for you and sad for us. So we wish you all the best. And I can't thank you enough for all the help you've given me, certainly over many, many years to help me understand different various, things in financial statements, et cetera. So I really, really thank you. And as I said, we are sad that you are retiring, but we hope you have some great plans and you'll have a lovely next 50 years. So with that, we will look to you for your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and you expect me to follow that, but thank you so much for those kind words. And I have certainly appreciated the time that yourself and Councillor Kavanagh in previous places have put to the audit process, because it is important. As I promised my last meeting, I am here to introduce the new team, a team that really doesn't need any introduction to this committee. To my left is Rebecca McDonald, formerly Prophet. And for those of you who were on the committee 2 years ago will recognize that Rebecca used to sit beside my side in a different role as the second partner on the city's audit. So she has been away doing the more important thing of raising a newborn, but she is now back and she will be your lead audit engagement partner, replacing me. I'm not sure if he's on screen or not, but Kevin Travers, who is our former city leader for KPMG in Canada and currently the audit partner for the City of Toronto, is also part of the team, playing the same role that he has played for me over the last 2 years. And to my far left is Ines Grubersek, who is the manager of the file, and you would have met Ines last year. And with that, thank you again for those kind words. Serving the city has been an honor and a great way to finish my 33-year career with serving the city's public sector. And with that, in more ways than one, Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. So I'm pleased to be here this morning and quite looking forward to taking the lead and working with the city and the team here going forward with your external audit process. I'll walk through some of the highlights in our audit plan this morning. Andrew has spoken to the team that will be supporting myself and bringing that strong senior leadership to our audit team, and Ines playing her role with continuity on the team and understanding the city's processes and strategies. If we continue to the following slide after this one, to our audit highlights. Some of the key matters on this slide, the first being related to our independence. So this really being the value that we bring as external auditors to the city. So we do perform additional services through the city with other partners within KPMG, but they are separate and distinct from our audit team. And we ensure we maintain those boundaries so that there could not be any thought or perceived encroachment on our independence. And the other item on this slide I'll speak to is our risk assessment. We'll go through the significant risks in the following slides, but on the bottom right-hand corner, we go through our other risks. So these areas are your key financial statement captions. We've assessed the risks here as base, with the exception of tangible capital assets having an elevated risk profile. And so we'll plan to perform procedures looking at some controls, substantive, going back to source documentation, confirmations where appropriate, and getting our sufficient appropriate audit evidence over these other risks of material misstatement. The following slide is our initial materiality for the group. So the city's financial statements are consolidated. So the materiality for those consolidated financial statements is 130 million. So that is consistent with past years, and that's based on the total revenues of the preceding year and based on our professional judgment within our professional parameters to come to that quantum. So that's the value we feel would impact users of the financial statements in making their decisions. The following slide goes through our scoping exercise as part of our risk assessment. So we have identified one significant component in terms of our group audit, and that is the City of Ottawa's non-consolidated books. So the materiality for that full scope audit would be 110 million. And then we do identify the main City of Ottawa encompasses 95% of the total assets of the group and 85% of the total revenues of the group, giving us sufficient coverage over the consolidated financial statements. And we do share in the middle of the page there the other components within the group, Hydro Ottawa Holding, the Ottawa Community Housing Corporation, the business improvement areas. Those three, we do perform audits as well, standalone financial statement audits outside of the city's audit. And then other financial statements that are consolidated include the Police Services Board, the Library, and the Health Board. But they are determined not to be significant components in terms of the group that we'll focus our procedures on. And then our next 3 slides will go through our significant risks. The first one being management override of controls. So this risk identifies the unique position that management is in when it comes to preparing the books and records and the financial statements. It's not a unique risk to the city. It is a Canadian auditing standard and one which we must apply across all audits. So in response to this risk, we'll look at journal entries, area of estimation, judgments, and any significant or unusual transactions to gain comfort over the management override of controls. The next significant risk is around the presumption of fraud involving improper revenue recognition. So we have rebutted this risk as we have in past periods when we look at the nature of the city's revenues from property tax collections, government funding. There's not significant judgments in terms of those revenues being recognized. So, and no financial compensation tied to contracts or judgments in terms of how those revenues are recognized. So we do rebut this risk, which is consistent in the sector. And then the third significant risk is around the consolidation process. And this is in response to just the complex organization of the city and giving all of the business units, all of the entities, and the manual processes that are involved in bringing the financial statements together. So our response to this risk is to understand the process, substantively test the transactions, look at the consolidation workbooks, the controls in place, and our IT audit team will look at any of the automated controls that are involved in that consolidation of the financial statements. And then our last slide is around our key milestones and deliverables. So where we are with our audit journey for the year. So we commenced our audit planning in October with discussions with management and the Auditor General. And our team is working through our interim audit work currently. So looking at our walkthroughs, control testing, and substantive testing back to source documentation. And our final field work will commence in April, and then we'll be back before this committee in June to present our audit findings. And that would be the highlights from our audit plan to share this morning. And I would just close by saying we've had the full cooperation of management in terms of our audit planning thus far and are well poised to execute this plan this year.
Super. All right. Any questions from the committee for KPMG on the audit plan? Councillor Kavanagh.
Yeah, thank you very much. One of the big topics that keeps coming up is cybersecurity, and I just wanted to know how that fits in.
Yes, Councillor Kavanagh. So we, as part of our risk assessment, we do perform an understanding of the IT controls and IT environment, and our IT audit specialists will be part of our IT audit team to understand that environment and where their controls are in place. And if there are issues or weaknesses identified, we would bring those through. If they're significant or otherwise, we would communicate those to management. And if they rise to a significant level, they'd be communicated back to this committee in our audit findings report.
So you have IT experts on that. Okay, thank you.
I don't see any other questions. I would like to just ask a question because I asked you it in our interview that we always have. But are there any standards that are changing that we need to be aware of for this year or in the next year?
Yes, so through you, Chair, for the current year, no accounting standard changes to impact the financial statements. There are some minor auditing standard changes with respect to our conversations with those charged with governance, so our communications. So we address those through the audit plan that's circulated, as well as our audit findings report that will be circulated. There will be some changes in your accounting standards impacting your 2027 year end. So we'll be working with management through those standards adoptions in preparation for 2027, and those will largely impact the format, the presentation, the financial statement presentation. So what those individual statements look like within the consolidated financial statements.
Thank you. I thought the committee might be interested in that the format will change, that make it easier for people to read and understand. So, okay, I don't see any other questions. So thank you very, very much for this. I think we do have to approve a motion here. Let me just flip back to my notes. We just have to receive that report. So is that report received? Received. Thank you very, very much. And I don't think we have any more questions.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
See you later. All right. Okay, so we will now move to the draft 2026 operating and capital budgets.
Thank you. So next slide. So we're presenting the draft budget for Audit Committee for 2026. And the agenda is basically to provide a budget overview, go through the Office of the Auditor General's budget summary and highlights, and then also corporate finance. Those are two separate budget items. Next slide. So the total operating budget within the responsibility of the Audit Committee is 3.6 million, with recoveries of just under 300,000. It includes both the operating budget of the Office of the Auditor General and the finance budget for external and special audits. The overall increase in the budget is just under 3.9% or 130,000, and there are no increases in FTEs. I will now pass the presentation to Joanne, or sorry, it's Natalie. Okay, for a summary of the Office of the Auditor General budget.
Merci, Isabelle. Next slide, please. So as you can see from this slide, our office is allocated $2.99 million for 2026. This is 100% attributable to us delivering on our work plan. 2 million of that budget is for salaries and benefits for our internal team, and $857,000 is attributable to our professional services dollars. So for expertise and additional resource in the delivery of our audit and investigation work, the administration of the city's fraud and waste hotline, as well as to ensure that our staff are able to continue their professional development and maintain their audit-related certifications. Unlike previous years, this budget is 100% allocated. This increase is 100% allocated to an increase in cost of living adjustment for salaries and benefits for the team. There is no other increase with respect to our materials and services from that perspective. We continue to see a growing need for additional resources for both audit and investigation work in our office. However, I continue to acknowledge the financial pressures facing the city, and we believe that this budget allocation is sufficient for us delivering on our mandate and the work plan that we will be presenting to you later on today. I will now pass the presentation back to Isabelle.
Next slide. So this table summarizes the operating budget for external and special audits. The total is 612,000 with recoveries of 264,000 for special audits, with a net requirement of 348,000 for the external audit of the city's financial statements. The amount was increased by 10,000 for both the cost and recoveries to account for two new special audits added for homelessness and encampments initiative and the ODSP. Next slide. There are 612,000 budgeted for all external audits coordinated by the finance department. The financial statement audit includes all the consolidated entities of the City of Ottawa, including the audit of the BIAs, Ottawa Community Lands, legacy pension plans, and the sinking fund. 264,000 of the 612,000 is recovered by finance from other entities, departments, programs, or projects that also require assurance and non-assurance audits. Examples include transfer payment agreements with the provincial and federal government, such as the LRT funding agreement, long-term care, public health, in-house waste collection, Ontario Works, and legacy pension plans, some of which require their own audited financial statements. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, questions? I don't see any questions. Okay,
I do have.
okay, Councillor
Sorry,
Kavanaugh.
sorry. No, I just want to make sure it's enough because the workload, especially the waste and fraud hotline, is overwhelming. And I just don't know how you get sorted through that, honestly.
Chair, as I mentioned, obviously, we continue to see a pressing, I guess, need for audits and investigations, but we are trying to manage our asks. You'll see as we walk through the work plan later this morning that we have the resources in order to deliver on that particular plan. If there's obviously something more that committee is looking to see from us, obviously our resources are stretched. I'm very fortunate to have a very hardworking and dedicated team. And because of that, we are able to provide a very good output. That being said, we also try to balance the burden on the administration. And so the more money we're given, the more resources I need to find, and as well the impact back on city staff, because obviously they are involved in our audits and we require their time.
Thank you. We often refer residents to you, I'm sorry. But based on the fact that they see something as a waste and I can't verify that, I need someone else to do that. So ends up in your hands, but we appreciate it and very thoughtful responses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I wanted to also thank the Auditor General for the amazing work that's being done by her office in terms of value for money audits, as well as independent oversight of city operations. I actually, in one of my budget consultations, had a resident asking the same question as Councillor Kavanaugh, or is the Office of the Auditor General getting enough? So I'm really pleased that you've noted that the amount that you're requesting will fulfill the adequacy and fulfill your statutory mandate and meet council's accountability expectations. My question really goes to whether your office benchmarks your audit function against peer municipalities, I guess Toronto. I'm just wondering, are there comparisons that are made regarding staffing levels, budget size, and audit coverage with a municipality like Toronto?
Chair, through you. Thank you very much for the very thoughtful question, Councillor. It's not a very easy answer because I think I've answered this one in the past. While obviously if you compare us to Toronto, we are roughly a third the size from a city and a city budget perspective, not Auditor General, but the city as a whole. But our responsibility and our mandate is to cover the same number of programs and services. So we do that comparison, but it's also, I hate to say it, not a very fair comparison, not an apples to apples comparison. We are probably just a little short of a third of both the budget and size. The Auditor General's office in Toronto is pretty close to about 50 in from a staffing resource perspective. And I'm currently sitting at 10 with, when I have a full staff complement, which I'm hoping to get to very shortly, would be 14. So we are significantly smaller in size as well as in budget. So we're small, but we're mighty. So we try really hard with what we have. And since our role is to obviously find efficiency and effectiveness across the city, we try to do that within our own office, of course. And my poor team, I challenge them daily on how can we do things with the same level of quality, but with less time and resources. So I guess all that to say is we do benchmarking. Toronto is obviously one of the key benchmarks that we do have. It's just, it really is hard to do that direct comparison, but we are significantly smaller in size for sure. And I guess I should
Okay.
also add that the City of Toronto also has a very large internal audit team. So that also helps from a coverage of various programs and services that the city does have to offer. Whereas internally here, Cyril has a very, very small compliance unit. So it's a very difficult comparison, but we are smaller and I think we're doing pretty good with what we do have. So.
Well, I would agree. I think the work that I see when I read your reports is exemplary. I think that Ottawa's audit function appears reasonably sized for a municipality our size, 1 million people, and the size of our operating budget, and the fact that we're able to still have these audits that really look at very complex service delivery models that utilize multiple boards and agencies, corporations, as well as city departments. So I just wanted to ask the question on behalf of my residents, but I do think that the value that we get from your office really serves us well as members of council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. All right, so I don't see any amending motions to this budget map motion, but I can look to Vice Chair Hubley to read it out, please. We just need your mic on.
Thank you, Chair. That the Audit Committee recommend that Council sitting as Committee of the Whole on December 10th, 2025, approve the Audit Committee portion of the 2026 draft operating and capital budgets as follows. 1, operating resource requirement, Office of the Auditor General, page 2. And the second one is operating resource requirement, external and external and special audits, page 4. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Is that carried?
Carried.
Carried. All right. So thank you very much for that. And now our next item, 5.1, Office of the Auditor General Audit Charter Update. This was a report. There's no presentation. So any questions on the report of the Audit Charter Update? I don't see any questions on that. So report recommendation is that the Audit Committee recommend that Council receive the OAG update on the Audit Charter. Is that motion carried? Carried. All right. So we move to item 5.2, Office of the Auditor General, Council Expenses Audit.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Avant de commencer,
Thank you so much. Before I start, I would like to thank the personnel. They help us so much, not only this year, but also the previous year's report. And I would like also to thank all of the members that answer our question.
Council expenses audit. I'm sure members may remember this when we presented our updated plan last year. Since I was auditing my 25 bosses, I thought it might be best that I bring in a firm to assist us to continue while my office is independent, getting even a little bit more arm's length away from this subject matter. So we brought in new consulting to assist us in conducting this audit. With us today is Emily Wilcox. She's a partner at New Consulting, and she will be happy to help us answer questions you may have at the end of the presentation. So I will now pass the presentation over to Deputy Auditor General Joanne Gorenstein, as well as Ria Khanna, Audit Principal, who will walk you through the results of our work. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Next slide. Thank you. Members of council, which includes the mayor and 24 ward councillors, are supported by 2 budgets, the council administration budget and the constituency services budget. These budgets are designed to enable members of council to effectively carry out their statutory duties. A constituency services budget is allocated annually to each councillor and the mayor to support the operations of their offices, constituent engagement, and participation in community activities. This budget covers a broad range of expenses, including staff salaries, office supplies, communications, sponsorships and donations, advertising, and other ward-related initiatives. The council administration budget is centrally administered by the Office of the City Clerk and supports expenses common to all members of council. It covers members' salaries, benefits for members and their staff, allowances, as well as certain collective expenses such as travel for specific conferences or participation in board and committee meetings. The table on this slide provides an overview of the allocation of the budgets for 2024 and 2025. The Council Expense Policy, which we will refer to as the policy through this presentation, provides guidance on how members of Council may allocate their constituency services budget in support of their statutory duties. The policy applies to all members of Council, their staff, and relevant city staff involved in the administration of these budgets. The policy recognizes the autonomy of members of Council in managing their budgets, and while there is some guidance on the split between compensation and office expenses, members of Council retain flexibility in how they manage their budgets, provided all spending complies with the policy guidelines. Next slide, please. The objective of this audit was to assess whether the administration of Council office expenses complied with applicable policies and regulations and represented the prudent use of public funds. The audit covered expenses made against the constituency services budget for the period from November 15th, 2022 to March 31st, 2025, and covered all members of Council. This includes salaries of members of Council office staff. Additionally, the audit included the Council administration budget. However, it did not include any salaries, benefits, or transportation allowances for members of Council. I will now pass the presentation to Joanne to walk through the findings from our audit. Next slide, please.
Thank you and good morning. Overall, the audit found that the Council expense policy is clear and generally well understood by members of Council and their staff. All expenses tested as part of this audit complied with the policy, were properly approved, were supported by core documentation, and were within budget limits. In addition, expenses incurred by members of Council were in support of their respective duties and responsibilities. The first finding presented on this slide is related to the recruitment of councillor assistants. Members of Council have full authority for the recruitment and hiring decisions of their office staff, including compensation. Councillor staff are formally referred to as councillor assistants, and while all staff share the same title, roles and responsibilities can vary. We learned that most councillor assistants are employed to do some combination of casework, communications, community relations, finance and administration, or policy and research. The Office of the City Clerk provides a recruitment and hiring toolkit with job descriptions, salary schedules, checklists, and interview tools to support councillors in the hiring process. With the exception of a few mandatory requirements, the use of these resources is optional. Councillors may recruit their staff through competitive processes or via informal channels or direct contact with specific candidates. While this discretion is essential to allow councillors the agility to hire appropriate staff in a timely manner as recruitments arise, there are important human resource practices that are not required for councillor assistants, but that are for other types of city staff, such as references or background checks. Given councillor assistants have access to sensitive information and some work directly with vulnerable members of the community, the absence of these practices increases the risk that staff could be hired without appropriate screening. This creates potential reputational concerns for the city and may reduce confidence in the integrity and professionalism of councillor offices. The second finding relates to the salaries of councillor assistants. The Office of the City Clerk suggests that councillors allocate the majority of their constituency services budget to staff compensation and provide guidance on individual salaries through job description templates and suggested salary ranges. These range from entry-level councillor assistants positions to senior roles with strategic responsibilities. The salary ranges were developed several years ago and only have been adjusted over time for cost of living. These ranges do not reflect a structured pay scale, nor are they compulsory for councillors to follow. Average annual salaries per full-time equivalent ranged across wards by 42.5% in 2024. That is between the lowest and the highest paid across all wards. These disparities are not necessarily explained by material differences in roles and responsibilities, which were found to be generally consistent across wards. While experience and tenure may account for some variation, the extent of the difference suggests a lack of consistency in compensation practices, as job descriptions and salary bands are not consistently leveraged by all councillors. The lack of alignment in compensation practices poses a risk to recruitment and retention, as counselor assistants have sought more competitive opportunities elsewhere within the city's administration or outside of the organization, creating challenges in maintaining experienced and skilled staff in counselor offices. Next slide, please. The third finding relates to financial reporting provided to members of council to help manage their budgets. Members of council receive both weekly and monthly financial reports to support management of their constituency services budget. The weekly report provides detailed year-to-date transaction information organized by general ledger code, while the monthly report is more summarized. The audit noted that while the monthly financial reports include high-level spending categories such as compensation, donations, administration, and events and sponsored projects, these budget amounts do not reflect each councillor's planned spending allocations as set by them in their individual budget planning process. Additionally, we learned that these categories are not detailed enough to allow all members to effectively track expenditures against their individual budgets. As a result, members of council reported that the monthly reports provided are of limited use in managing their budgets, and many rely on their own tools and spreadsheets for financial tracking. Without reports that reflect members' planned budgets and provide sufficient category detail, there is a risk of inaccurate or ineffective tracking, misinterpretation of financial position, and reduced ability to plan and manage expenses accordingly. The last finding relates to public disclosures of members' expenses. Under the council expense policy, all office expenses funded through the constituency services budget must be publicly disclosed on the city's website. These disclosures are intended to give the public a clear picture of how members of council use the resources available to them. To support the setup and ongoing operations of councillor offices, the Office of the City Clerk provides one-time per term of council and annual credits to their constituency services budgets above the standard annual budget received by each councillor. Councillors who chair committees may also receive a monthly salary credit to their constituency services budget to allow them to hire staff to help them manage their additional responsibility. In reviewing the public disclosures and the financial system data, the audit noted that the public disclosures are reported net of these budget credits. By reporting net of credits, the city is understating its public disclosure of actual spending, which reduces the transparency of councillor office expenses. Ensuring public disclosures reflect gross expenses will provide a more accurate and transparent picture of councillor spending. Overall, 4 recommendations were made directed at management, and the city has agreed to all of them. Next slide, please. This concludes our presentation. We would be happy to take any questions committee members or councillors may have related to this audit.
Thank you very much. Questions for the Auditor General? Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much for doing this audit. And I think one of the most important things was in the hiring of assistants. We know that informal hiring was a problem in the past. And we had to do something about that to make it a proper format. So I appreciate that being a focus. And I appreciate the work of the city staff to work with councillors' offices to ensure that we have somebody, for example, who sits in on interviews to be a nonpartisan person who's not in the office and help us out. So I appreciate that. I think that was necessary. In terms of salaries for assistants, having been an assistant before myself, not here, but on the Hill, there's a lot of variations, and you've pointed that out. And I think we have to remind ourselves what the cost of living is. And I appreciated the city recognizing that because they were underpaid. And I appreciated that effort, that recognition. Just a back of the envelope, what it costs to live in Ottawa. If you have to pay rent of $2,000, you have to have a salary of $72,000 to recognize that as 1/3. So that's a reality. So I appreciate the recognition of that we have excellent staff. And they do incredible work. I think we all appreciate the work that they do. And it's good to have this monitored. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Kitts?
Yes, thank you. It might be more a question directed to staff, but I was just wondering sort of how this is going to play out in terms of the next steps, because obviously the recommendations are kind of directed at members of council, but the city has accepted them on our behalf. So what is to come in terms of how this flows back to individual members of council?
Chair, so actually the recommendations are in many cases directed to the city clerk. So it's the city clerk to work with council in order to establish. So for example, establish frameworks and what that looks like and how that's implemented would be up to the city clerk and council to work together on.
Okay, so I don't see any more questions for the Auditor General, so maybe we'll direct that one specifically to the city clerk. Caitlin's coming up to the mic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have with me Kyle Anderson, the Manager of Governance, Elected Officials and Business Support Services. So I understand the question was with respect to next steps. So I think it's important to recognize that members of council have accountability for their own budgets, and council as a whole sets the policies that govern council expenses. So we will be taking these recommendations away and developing new tools for members in terms of the hiring recommendations that we will bring forward for council's consideration as required in advance of the next term of council. As members are aware, council has directed us to review matters related to their offices twice per term of council through the midterm and end of term governance review. With respect to the public disclosure adjustments to Ottawa.ca, we'll be implementing those in 2026.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions for the city clerk? I guess I have one question. In terms of making the reports we get more understandable, are there other municipalities that have different ways of producing that information that might be helpful that we could look at?
I think that'll be part of the work we do with finance in terms of developing those customized reports for members of council, and any best practices that exist in other municipalities. We're certainly going to draw on that.
And Chair, maybe I'll just add to that. We have the lowest level of detail available, and the weekly reports are pretty detailed. We can customize reports at the will of council or each councillor, I guess. From an internal perspective, we have a standard suite of corporate finance reports, and then each of the departments, we provide different layers of information depending on the needs. So we can do that whenever councillor or councillors are ready to do that type of format change, if you will.
All right. Other question I have is, maybe newer counselors, because we've done the hiring process most recently. I mean, one of the first things I did was I simply just reached out to the clerk's office and said, tell us how this is done. We'll do whatever you tell us to do. And so we did that. But is that not something that has already been figured out, that you could just say to counselors, just call us and we'll help you do it all?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's been our experience. I think what the recommendations are showing us is that there's an opportunity to improve the guidance and resources we provide to members of council when they do reach out, to ensure that members can make staffing decisions with confidence while maintaining the integrity of their office budget.
Okay. The only other question I have is the idea that the city councilor's assistants would have to have a criminal record check. Is that something that would then be retroactive to the city councilor's assistants we already have?
Madam Chair, recognizing that all existing staff have contracts that last the duration of the term, we're seeking to bring forward any changes for the new term for those staff. So no, that nothing would be retroactive, and we will be looking to identify where there would be an opportunity to provide an additional guidance to members of council on reference check procedures and background checks for specific roles.
Great. Okay. Any other questions? No one online? Councillor Vice Chair Hubley?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just not a question, more a statement. I just want to thank the city clerk and her office, and I think we should also mention the integrity commissioner for the advice they give us that keeps us out of trouble. This could have been a really bad audit if we didn't have somebody like Caitlin and her team that are there to answer questions for us before we get in trouble. And so thank you very much for that.
Absolutely. That was very important to say. Thank you for saying that. Okay, so the report recommendations are that the audit committee receive the audit report and recommend that council consider and approve the recommendations. Is this report received? Received. All righty. And now item 5.3, Office of the Auditor General Audit of Ottawa Paramedic Service.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to wait for another team member here to join us, and then Joanne will kick off the presentation.
Thank you. The next report we would like to present is the audit of Ottawa Paramedic Service. I would like to thank the Ottawa Paramedic staff that participated in this audit for their effort and support. Next slide, please. The Ottawa Paramedic Service, or the service, provides patient care and emergency medical coverage to more than 1 million residents of Ottawa. The Ministry of Health is responsible for emergency medical services, and the Ottawa Paramedic Service is a designated delivery agent. This includes responsibilities such as supervising staff, maintaining vehicles and equipment, and assuring the quality of service delivery. In 2024, the service achieved both provincial and municipal response time targets for the first time since 2020. This is due to continuous work with local hospitals to reduce offload delay, which is when paramedics are unable to immediately transfer the care of a patient to hospital staff. This is also due to the recently implemented improved call triage tool, investments from council to hire additional paramedics, and continued provincial funding. The service is structured into 4 branches: operations, communications, patient and regulatory programs, and logistics planning and training. Within the operations branch, primary care paramedics, advanced care paramedics, and superintendents provide patient care and emergency medical coverage. Additionally, advanced care paramedics are specially trained to administer controlled substances and perform advanced procedures. Paramedics report to superintendents who play a critical leadership role. They provide mentoring, coaching, and support to over 500 paramedics in the field. They attend calls to support crews and respond to major and complex incidents while also supervising their direct reports. Next slide, please. The service is subject to oversight bodies such as the Ministry of Health that mandate periodic audits and reviews. To avoid overlap, we chose to focus the objective of this audit on providing reasonable assurance that the city has the necessary processes, controls, and resources to support operations paramedics in their day-to-day activities. As such, the scope of the audit primarily focused on in-field support and oversight provided by superintendents to the paramedics within the operations branch, as well as the management of controlled substances. This included assessing areas such as the tools and training provided to superintendents to enable them to effectively support paramedics, the processes to support and respond to violence against paramedics, including the incident reporting, and the management and administration of controlled substances. I will now pass the presentation over to Julia Weber, the audit principal on this audit, to present the findings. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Joanne. The first audit finding relates to the management and administration of controlled substances. The service is required to follow Health Canada policies and also has internal policies that govern the use and care of controlled substances. While safeguards like segregation of duties and access controls are in place, our audit identified several gaps that increase risk in 3 main areas. The first area is around the administration of controlled substances. The service's internal policy requires, at minimum, monthly audits to verify if the usage of controlled substances was appropriate and in line with ministry requirements. Additionally, the service is required to track and review the distribution of controlled substances to advanced care paramedics monthly. However, neither of these practices are currently being performed. Further, in our review of a sample of administration and patient care records, we identified several instances where the wastage of controlled substances was not documented appropriately. These gaps represent administrative errors. However, they also result in non-compliance with ministry documentation standards for wastage of controlled substances. The second area where gaps were noted pertains to the inventory management of controlled substances.
We identified that the full inventory management lifecycle, including the ordering, receiving, and handling of expired controlled substances, is not reflected in the current policy or other procedure documentation. In addition, there are specific areas where the oversight of inventory management is limited, which increases the risk of undetected errors or misuse. For example, there is not currently a process to ensure the legitimacy of controlled substance restock transactions. However, we did not know any issues in this area for the sample of restock transactions that we tested. The last area relates to access controls. Our review identified that access listings are not regularly reviewed, and individuals not involved in the management of controlled substances had access to the storage room where controlled substances are maintained. Overall, these gaps collectively increase the risk of theft, misuse, reputational harm, and noncompliance with provincial and internal requirements. Next slide, please. The second group of findings relates to support for paramedics. The first finding is around the new paramedic onboarding process. For context, when paramedics are hired by the service, they've already completed a 2-year paramedic program and passed the provincial Advanced Emergency Medical Care Assistance exam. The service then requires new paramedics to complete an 8-week in-house training program, which is a mix of in-class orientation and observation shifts, which is when the new hires places a third person with an experienced crew. Our audit found that the training and onboarding approach varied between recent new hire groups. Specifically, due to operational constraints, there's been variability in the duration of observation shifts, ranging from a few shifts to a few weeks. Additionally, there's variability in the level of oversight and mentorship available to new paramedics once they are on the road. Despite efforts to try different approaches for the training and onboarding program, these inconsistencies have led to new paramedics frequently seeking additional support from operations superintendents. Inconsistent onboarding and oversight could result in new paramedics being ill-equipped for operational duties and has led to an increased workload for operations superintendents. To mitigate this, during our audit, we learned that management has hired 4 new superintendents in the training team who will provide dedicated oversight and mentorship for new paramedics to help alleviate this increased workload. The second finding is around the peer support program. To help support employee well-being, the service has a peer support program, which is made up of volunteer peer supporters from across the service who are trained in crisis intervention. The program is highly utilized and a tool superintendents have available to them to support paramedics after potentially difficult calls or if individuals are struggling. As part of the evolving wellness strategy, the service is establishing an interdisciplinary well-being team, which includes both mental health professionals as well as peer supporters. During the audit, it was noted that active changes were happening to the peer support program as a result of this wellness strategy, but limited details had been shared, which led to stress and uncertainty amongst paramedics. Additionally, superintendents who rely on these programs to support paramedics also felt that they had been provided limited insights into the upcoming changes to reassure and support their teams. The perceived lack of messaging from leadership about the future direction of the existing support programs reflects a broader theme identified in the audit, where paramedics and superintendents feel like there's a lack of communication and transparency about the decisions being made at the leadership level. Next slide, please. The last finding focuses on violence experienced by paramedics while on duty. Reports have indicated that there's been a global rise in violence against healthcare workers. While exact figures are unknown, paramedics reported that they have experienced an increase in workplace violence. As part of a survey administered for this audit, we asked paramedics whether they have experienced violence from the public while on duty. While all respondents indicated they had experienced violence, 37% indicated that they'd experienced violence or threats of violence while on duty at least monthly. Management confirmed that the safety of paramedics is a top priority, and to advance work in this area, a designated commander is responsible for overseeing and for tracking paramedic assaults. The service has also established an external violence working group tasked with recommending strategies to reduce external violence. While survey responses and interviews indicated that paramedics feel supported by superintendents when they experience these incidents, our audit work revealed a broader finding related to violence in the service at large. 82% of survey respondents indicated they had experienced violence and chose not to report it. One of the main reasons for underreporting was a belief that reporting would not lead to action. Other reasons cited was the perception that violence is part of the job or that the incident was too minor to warrant reporting. From audit work completed, we learned that the expectations for reporting an incident of violence is not always clear. In addition, tracking mechanisms are manual and cumbersome, resulting in a current backlog of incidents, and there is no reporting that's currently performed on the track data. Employees not having a clear understanding of what instances they should report, or if they are not inclined to report based on the perceived lack of action, could result in reduced employee morale and potential liability issues for the city. In addition, without consistent reporting, the service is unable to get an accurate picture of how often violence is occurring, which limits its ability to respond effectively and to support paramedics. Next slide, please. This concludes our presentation. We'd be happy to take any questions committee members may have related to this audit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the Office of the Auditor General? Councillor Hill.
Thank you very much for the audit. With regard to the first recommendation as it pertains to controlled substances and oversight, I did note that you identified that there was non-compliance with the destruction of outdated controlled substances. But with regard to the oversight and management day-to-day, day in, day out of controlled substances, it was a little more nuanced in the audit report. Are you saying that there was non-compliance, or are you saying that there was an additional risk, or that there perhaps could be additional risk mitigations, but that the Ottawa paramedics are operating within compliance?
Thank you for the question through the chair. So the management and oversight of the controlled substances is a process with lots of activities, and there are lots of controls. So I would want to state that there are lots of controls embedded. Where we did our work, we noted that, there was some steps in the documented process by which some audits and checks and balance, or I guess I'd say audits, that were not being performed as expected through the documentation. There were other compensating controls that did exist, but this was a step that they stated they were doing, and they were not. So we noted that. We also identified it in certain cases where as you mentioned, there's administrative requirements. This was related to wasted product that might have been used, wasted during a call. We're not at all saying that we saw any kind of fraud or risk of fraud or anything like that. This is administrative errors that one document was documented on one, but it wasn't documented on another document. So there's just some opportunities for improved oversight controls related to avoid administrative errors such as that. And so our recommendation really was focused on looking at the process end to end and making sure that the risks have been effectively mitigated.
So is it a fair characterization to say that improving the policies with which you're recommending is going to improve processes as opposed to take us from a state of non-compliance to compliance?
Thank you for the question. So there are areas where they are not compliant currently. So it's both. Improving the controls will both improve the control environment as well as ensure compliance with all regulatory requirements and internal policy requirements.
Thank you.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for this report. And of course, we appreciate the work of our paramedics, and we want them to be as safe as possible. So it's pretty shocking to hear about the violence, but not surprising. Do we have any comparisons with other municipalities? Is this a trend across the province, for example?
I will start off by answering that, but I think Pierre can probably add to that. What we have anecdotally heard is that this is an increasing trend across many paramedic services, but I know the questions are to us, but I think it'd be appropriate for Pierre to answer that one now, Chair, if you're okay with that.
Chair, with respect to other municipalities, we all kind of in Eastern Ontario follow similar processes. There may be different nuances within the actual policy. And what the Auditor General has highlighted is some of the checks and balances that we're supposed to perform on a monthly basis have not taken place. So we're continuing we've agreed with the Auditor General in terms of us following through on the policy that's already in existence, and then reviewing the policy to mitigate further risk.
Yeah, the question was, is the trends of violence, is that a pattern across that that we're seeing across?
My apologies, Chair. With respect to violence, violence against paramedics is a significant problem. It's been highlighted particularly in Australia and in the UK over the last 10 years or so. What's happened in North America is also in a negative trend. At this point, we're part of a national study to quantify the problem and to define the problem of what is assault and what the gravity is. So across not just Ontario, but across Canada, it is a significant issue that we're all facing. And we're developing processes internally to document first, to escalate, and to involve police services to recognize that the most polite way of saying it is that it's not okay and it's not part of the job in terms of violence. And also have police follow up on that in terms of the fact that it is a criminal offense. And more recently, at the House of Commons, there's a bill S233, which is going forward to make violence against first responders, including healthcare practitioners, an aggravated assault, because we're at the point of zero tolerance. That this is an unacceptable behavior for those individuals who are providing care to individuals in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's obviously a trend for frontline workers across everything, even teachers and just about everything you can think of. But yeah, thank you. And I was just checking to see if it was being monitored, if you were checking the stats of other places, but I very much appreciate the comments. Thank you.
Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Chair. Only 28% staff responded to the audit survey that you put out. Appreciating that it's voluntary and it's sometimes hard to get respondents. Was that, I guess, were you satisfied with that response? Is that comparable to other staff audit surveys that you've put out?
Chair, yes, I believe it was 28% responding to our survey. I think that's pretty standard. Usually with non-compulsory surveys, the 30% range is kind of where most people strive, and anything above that is pretty exceptional. So that being said, as we note in our report, that can be there can be biases in those responses, because in some cases those that do respond could be those that have something to say about the matter. So we always take that into consideration when looking at the results.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions from committee members. I just have one question. The recommendation you made about peer support, would you say that there was an understanding of the people that responded that you talked to, and even in the workplace, would you find that they understood why it is important to have like a critical incident debrief, why that process is important, what the difference between significant trauma and, like we say, capital T trauma, small t trauma is, and what happens in your brain? Would you say that there's a lot of understanding of why these things are even important?
Chair, I wouldn't say that our audit got to that level of detail, but what I can say, and I look to my team to see if they'd like to add to that, is that the programs and services that are or were available to them they're very thankful for them, and they're very much used. So I think they indirectly see the benefit in actually seeking out assistance and help.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking, and I will have a question for staff, but just that if they aren't aware of the programs, to me, that's a problem, because then I think they're not real. Some of them aren't, or they're not getting enough. The communication is not clear enough that why everyone should know about this and why it is such an important part of your job as a first responder. I don't know if you have any further comment.
I would just add that as part of our audit, we did very much understand that this is a program that the superintendents use as support, as a tool for their paramedics. So we learned of certainly how they use it. They recommend it. They pull the paramedics off the road to access the support that they need, as well as the commanders also have responsibilities for ensuring that their staff leverage these tools.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions for staff? Councillor Hill.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to follow up, Mr. Poirier, with my questions to the auditor about the controlled substances oversight. First off, could you perhaps set the table a little bit? What is a general inventory of what would be defined as controlled substances?
Controlled substances are subject to the Controlled Substances Act, which is a national piece of legislation that regulates pharmaceutical agents such as morphine, fentanyl, which are carried by advanced care paramedics. Advanced care paramedics will have a small pouch with a number of vials within that pouch. In terms of process, we have a series of mailboxes from which an advanced care paramedic will use their ID card. They'll swipe it, a box will open, they'll take out their medications, and they'll have them on their person. As they go about their day, if they administer drugs, they record it on the electronic patient record, but they also record it on a drug usage form. At the end of the day, they put their pouch back in a mailbox once again. And on the back side of that mailbox, we have staff who remove that pouch, note the changes, record the changes, refill the pouch, put it back in the process. And the auditor, in terms of their review, noted that those processes are intact, but what was lacking was the next level would be that on a monthly basis, an individual, a commander level, would look at the back end of where the pouches are always being refilled to reconcile all of those daily documents on a monthly basis. And then on the front end, that our commander of quality assurance professional standards would take a look at the actual electronic patient record to look at the administration of the drugs and reconcile it with the forms that go with that. And that has to be done on a monthly basis as well. And that's our commitment, is to reinvigorate that part of the process. The second piece is to take a look at our full length of our process to mitigate any other risks that may be coming. We also are in the process of changing the mailbox system, where today we have about, over 300 mailboxes. To reduce the number of mailboxes, we're going to do it more like the Canada Post model, where there'll be times when your card will only open up one box. So for that day, that box will be open. You'll be able to extract your drugs. So it'll limit the size or the amount of drugs that we have in our mailboxes. So it's a process that we're happy that the Auditor General took a look at, so that we can really improve our process along the continuum. Thank you.
Thank you for that description. As the chief of the paramedics, is it your assessment that we have a problem with regards to potential loss of controlled substances within the paramedics?
Madam Chair, I think the Auditor General recorded that there was no incidence of misuse or loss. And I think that's an important point to note, is that our processes are in place, they're working, but we could do better. And I think that's the important takeaway for our service. Thank you.
I certainly took that away for sure. And I just want the public to understand that from this audit, we are getting better at our processes. That's not necessarily an indictment of the fact that at present we have a problem with regard to oversight of controlled substances. Is that a fair characterization?
Chair, I agree with the assessment.
We got ourselves into a situation a few years ago when level zeros became problematic. And we had paramedics that were going beyond perhaps their core services of needing to go out and provide first response support to residents of Ottawa as the result of administrative issues with the transfer and handover of patients at the hospitals. I would not want to see an administrative process detract from the core service requirements of our paramedic service. Is it a fair comment that implementing the recommendations that are being put before you by the Auditor General are not going to take away from the first response requirements of paramedics and put them into a place where they're spending additional hours doing administrative back-end paperwork that otherwise could see those paramedics out on the street providing services to the public?
Madam Chair, I do not foresee the recommendations as being an onerous task for our service. They're welcomed. We view these as an important audit process to improve our service, but also we have other initiatives within the service where we're looking at our different software applications to speed the process. So when I mentioned earlier, the reconciliation of the actual use of the controlled substance, say morphine or fentanyl, is recorded on a paper form. We're actually today looking at how we can put that in electronic forms to ensure that these elements are actually available without doing a manual process and then doing an electronic review. So we do not view this recommendation as being onerous or as in a negative in terms of our commitment to the community and our service delivery.
Thank you very much, Chief. To underscore, the management of controlled substances, critically important. The provision of your first response service to the community, critically important. The function of this audit, critically important. Thank you very much to the auditor. Thank you very much to our paramedics for what they do day in, day out. And I appreciate very much that what we're doing here is we're taking, you know, an A product and we're polishing it to an A+. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Kavanagh?
Yeah, thank you. I think we're all shocked when we hear about violence against somebody who's trying to help you or help someone. And it's very disturbing. And it's obviously a trend. Is there any campaigns of communication on, you know, this is not okay? I just saw an interesting campaign on the Gatineau buses against bus drivers, you know, about people being abusive. And it's terrible, you have to point it out, but is that of something we should look at?
Through the chair, I think in the report itself, there's a picture which shows an open ambulance, and there's a large sticker in the window that says zero tolerance, which speaks to every patient that we take care of, and also speaks to the police officers on scene who recognize that when we ask the question or that we're willing to report violence, that they see that as well, that there's a full recognition. In terms of advocacy, I think 2 weeks ago, we were at Parliament Hill advocating on behalf of this legislation for the status of aggravated assault.
Thank you. I want to give a shout out to when, you know, we don't have much interaction with paramedics unless someone calls one. But in terms of the wellness clinics, I have to give a shout out to those because I don't think people realize that that's another aspect of what you do. And it's been a huge help in communities, particularly for those without primary care. It's kind of nice to see that they are doing these things that are helping people directly in the community where they're very welcome and get great feedback. I don't know if they get a chance to rotate around so that they get that opportunity, but I just wanted to give a shout out because I see the positive effect it has. But the wellness clinics, both like at the library, and sometimes in buildings like the naturally occurring retirement communities, and also in Ottawa community housing. It's been excellent, and I just want to know, you know, is there sort of a balancing act to sort of give paramedics a chance to see that side, you know, on the preventative side?
Madam Chair, thank you for the comment. We do solicit on a regular basis for new recruits to the community paramedic program. And more and more what we're trying to do as a service is to make some of these initiatives part of the regular operation. And it's really an important community service that we provide. We're proud of it. And you know, what I envisioned several years ago was a couple of paramedics doing community paramedicine. Today we have close to 40. And with ongoing funding from the Ministry of Health, we expect to expand those programs again.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Chair. We have 36 paramedic superintendents for 383 primary care paramedics and 164 advanced care paramedics. I was just wondering, do we have enough superintendents? And is there a benchmark for the number we would need for a municipality of our size?
Madam Chair, our ratio of superintendents to paramedics on the road, we strive for a number that is around 20, and that varies. Some are higher, some are lower. From a contractual point of view, we've avoided putting that in any contractual language, just in terms of maintaining the flexibility to recognize the unique services we provide. And the reason I mention that is that we have tactical teams, which are much higher demand organizationally. So the ratio of superintendent to paramedic will be lower, and a regular ops may be a little bit higher. So this maintains that flexibility. Over the last several years, with investments from council, we've increased significantly the number of superintendents that in terms of their oversight to the paramedics, with the desire, and we're at that point now, is that because of our several rotations, we have about 15 start times throughout the day. Our intent is to have the superintendent see all of their staff and not have any orphan paramedics who don't have a direct report. So over the last several years, and I think of note probably 6 superintendents in the last 2 years, we've been able to address that issue that there are no orphan paramedics, and I apologize for saying it that way, but that specifically paramedics are attached to a superintendent who they will receive on or who they will see on a regular basis.
Okay, great. So you're satisfied with the ratio and sounds like it's getting better all the time.
That is correct.
Okay, wonderful. And I was just wondering, is burnout, like a burnout rate, tracked for paramedics and superintendents? Is that something that we're monitoring?
Madam Chair, our service monitors our LTD, WSIB costs, and we pay close attention to them. Since the introduction of presumptive legislation in 2016, 2017, we've seen a significant increase in our WSIB costs. And now this goes back to the investment from committee and council, wherein our investment plan recognized the need for more paramedics, but also gave the Ottawa Paramedic Service 3 FTEs dedicated to wellness. We've since hired a psychologist, and just this month, we have 2 offer letters out for 2 mental health clinicians, one being a social worker, the other a psychotherapist, where we're trying to fill out the service or the service continuum for the mental health of our staff. And if I can be just a reference to peer support, that's some of the communication that I have to do better at in terms of informing staff of the introduction of a psychologist and 2 mental health clinicians and how they're going to intersect with the current service that we have in terms of peer support, which is a very mature system. We've had a peer support team for over a dozen years. We're often the reference point for other city services in terms of providing peer support. So some of my communication that I have to improve upon is explaining the relationship that's going to take place in terms of peer support, first level mental health clinicians, and then high level mental health clinician traumatology at that end to deal with issues of PTSD and burnout.
Okay, great. Thank you for that answer. It's good to hear that the suite of supports is expanding. Obviously, a very difficult job. We want to make sure our paramedics are well supported. So thank you for that. My final question, just to respond to this, high rate of violence against paramedics. I do know some municipalities or some paramedic services are exploring body cameras for paramedics. Is this something on your radar at all?
Madam Chair, yes, it is. It's not on my 26 work plan, but it is something we are taking a look at to start to define the need. I'm not aware of any other paramedic services in the country that currently have body-worn cameras. Part of our review at the front end will be to take a look at all the implications with respect to personal health information and the custody of that information. And the privacy that surrounds all of that. So we're taking a look at it. There's a significant cost implication also in terms of the retention of data that goes with it. So to answer your question, yes, we are taking a look at it, not in this year of 26, but it is something that we're kind of planning for in the future. Thank you.
Okay, great. Those are my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. I think I just have a couple comments. So maybe a question. I'm wondering if you would consider talking to the people at CHIO or even at the school boards for their methods of monitoring how much violence their various staff members are experiencing, because they have looked at this, I think, quite a long time ago. And certainly in the emergency rooms, you know, maybe everywhere, but more in emergency rooms than other places, and certainly in classrooms where educational assistants, early childhood educators are experiencing a lot of violence. And, you know, there are reasons, absolutely. But just to track it is the most important thing. But you can't have it as such a difficult thing to track that then they forget later on by the end of their shift that it has to be something quite quick. Because in terms of when I sat on the Children's Hospital Board, this was something that was actually a key part of our strategic plan in terms of tracking that for wellness for our hospital staff. So we had to come up with something quite easy to do. So I would just recommend that you talk to other entities because they have been tracking this for a long time. The other thing I was going to say is, you know, it's great that you have various staff coming on. We see this with police services as well, you know, same with officers needing to make sure that they do critical incident debriefs. But you know, and I said this at first to the Auditor General, I think it would be helpful if people understood why it's important to do these things. That we have so much more knowledge now in terms of when we put functional MRIs on people's heads to see what's going on in a person's brain when they experience trauma, and then what it looks like to actually process through trauma. A lot of people don't understand what that means. They just think, oh, maybe I go see a therapist. But there's actually a process. There's a reason why the critical incident debrief is the particular 4 questions you ask, and why you have to have a person who's a professional do that with you. And I don't think people understand why. I think they think, oh, it's something we do, but what actually happens in the brain. So I guess, you know, one of the comments I would have is, you know, would you consider having an educational session first by the staff that you're potentially hiring so people understand why these things are important?
Chair, we currently do have several psychological processes as part of our hiring process. And just this fall, we instituted the Emotional Skills Resilience Training. And it's a program that was developed with the RCMP at the University of Regina and at Depot. It's an evidence-based, evidence-informed process that starts that process of building resilience in staff as they come into our service. We have several other initiatives that we're looking at as we work with and look for evidence-informed treatments and looking at the full spectrum of when you hire somebody to when they're with you for a few weeks and a few years to mid-career and career. So we have several initiatives of particular note. We've been working with Dr. Nick Carlton, who is a renowned psychologist in this area through the Canadian Institute of Public Safety Research and Treatment out of the University of Regina, which is sponsored by the federal government.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much for this very important audit. So we have a report recommendation that the Audit Committee receive the audit report and recommend that Council consider and approve the recommendations. Is this received? All right, thank you. So item 5.4, Office of the Auditor General, 2026-27 Audit Work Plan.
Thank you, Chair. Si on peut partager la présentation, s'il vous plaît. So our last report that we are presenting today is the 2026-2027 Audit Work Plan, which is actually, sad to say this a little bit, but excited too, my last 2-year audit plan of my mandate. Next slide, please. So we go through a 5-step process in the determination of our audit work plan. I won't go through all the details because I know you've all heard me say this practically on an annual basis. But a quick high level is the first thing we do is we update our audit universe. So this is looking at any activity that could be subject to audit. So all the programs, services, any activity that collectively will contribute to the city in achieving its strategic objectives. We then look at tons of documents, strategic plan, budgets, the Housing Task Force, Innovation Task Force reports, all those types of documents. We consult with various stakeholders. So that includes, obviously, I met with every counselor. I met with the senior leadership team. In some cases, we meet with directors and managers in areas that we don't have as strong of an understanding on, or if we haven't audited it in a while, in order to ensure that we understand the risks. I meet with all the auditor generals municipally across Canada on a quarterly basis, so we pick each other's brains. I also meet with the provincial and federal auditor generals, meet with the external auditors, and then we also conducted a survey of members of the public in order to understand what areas they feel would warrant an independent audit. So we take all that information together, which helps us establish our risk assessment, which we utilize in order to select our audits and to prioritize them. We do so taking into account the resources that are available to us, as well as the need for us to be agile in this ever-changing environment. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. And I should say, just before we get to these particular elements here, there are new requirements under our standards, under the internal auditor standards, which requires an audit function to consider as part of their audits. And these are called mandatory topical requirements. So in designing our work plan, we took these into consideration and included the where appropriate. So items such as cybersecurity, which you will see as an ever evolving element for the foreseeable future on our audit plan. So on the left of this slide, you will find our audits that were previously approved that we are currently working on. And those include an audit of the OC Transpo route planning and scheduling, an audit of cash in lieu of parklands, cybersecurity audit, as I just mentioned, as well as an audit of project management for the Ottawa Police Service, which was previously approved by their board. On the right, you will find the subject matters that we are proposing to committee and for council's approval for 2026 and 2027. And they include subject matters such as 311, employment and social services, solid waste, traffic management, recreational programs and facilities, roads maintenance, value for money audit of infrastructure project, as well as the relevant procurement processes, human resources, the downtown revitalization project, social housing, water services, as well as a previously approved audit of equity, diversity, and inclusion for the Ottawa Police Service. Our intention is also to continue with our agile audits of the zero emissions buses project, the light rail transit, as well as Lansdowne 2.0. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. As always, we will continue to perform our follow-up procedures on previously issued recommendations to ensure that management is implementing the agreed upon actions in a timely manner. And we will report the status of those procedures and management's actions on a semi-annual basis. In addition to our audits, we will continue to be responsible for the administration of the city's fraud and waste hotline. I would like to highlight to members of committee, we had intended on actually launching an awareness campaign this month, but we've postponed it to Q1 of next year. There's obviously been a lot of key city priorities, such as the budget in Lansdowne this month, so that is part of our rationale for postponing that. We will also continue to do work on larger investigations as they arise, whether through fraud and waste complaints or as a result of our audits. We will also continue ongoing internal self-assessments. They are required as part of the standards. But one item, which is only required every 5 years, so it's now come due, is in order for us to comply with the Institute of Internal Auditor Standards, we are required to be subject to an independent external quality assessment, and that's to verify our conformance with the standards. So the results of that assessment will be reported to committee next year. I will be and already have started working with the chair in the selection of a firm to ensure that that selection is independent. We always ensure that we select somebody that hasn't done work, so they're not critiquing their own work as well, since we leverage other firms. And so, as I mentioned, we will report back to committee on that. My intention is our September audit committee next year. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. As always, we have incorporated flexibility into our audit work plan to ensure our office is able to execute the work under our mandate. have the agility to shift our priorities quickly, as well as to manage the burden, as I previously mentioned, on the city's administration. Should time permit, or should our priorities shift, we have included these particular elements on our audit horizon for inclusion. I will not walk through all of those particular elements, but I think this year, exceptionally, this plan is important for us to have that flexibility. Obviously, we have an election coming up next year, and we usually bring any potential changes to our work plan at the last audit committee of the year. And at that point, we may be very well in the midst of an election cycle. So I've purposely put a few extras on here in case we do not have the ability to come back to audit committee. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. Thank you very much. This concludes our presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions committee members have at this time.
Super. Questions for the Auditor General? Councillor Kitts.
Thank you very much. I noticed with the summer 2025 survey, the top 5 identified, or I guess audits people were interested in, transportation planning was one of them. That did not make it into the new audits for 2026, 2027, and I did not see it on the horizon. Yeah, so what happened to that one?
Well, it's quite interesting. So we had, if committee members recall what the survey looked like, we had essentially kind of a top 30 list for members of the public to select, or also a kind of an other category. While many individuals selected transportation planning, they also had the ability to put a comment. And as we read through those comments, it was very clear that where people were concerned was more about managing the traffic. So that is why you see a traffic management audit on the list and not a transportation planning, because it seemed very clear that that's what members of the public were concerned about.
So would the scope of the traffic management also include the plan? So in my community, for example, congestion and traffic management is a big problem, but it's largely because of the planning that went into that transportation network. So
it's a very good question. So the actual scope of our audit gets determined at our planning stage. So as we meet with staff members, and I will also we always select a sample of counselors to get your feedback on what you'd like to see included in that audit or where your pain points are. We'll be doing that, and that will help us establish what that scope looks like. Is that a potential? Yes, it is definitely a potential.
Okay. I look forward to chatting then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions on the work plan? No? All right. Questions for staff on the work plan? Capacity, maybe? Councillor Kavanaugh.
This is actually for the auditor. In terms of the social housing audit, I just wanted to confirm, does that involve Ottawa Community Housing or directly?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Chair through you. Councillor, as you know, we did have a chat. I did want to let you know that OCH may be the subject of an audit, and I have spoken with Stefan, the president. It may very well. It is a very broad area, so we are going to do a very thorough planning phase in order to determine what that looks like. I'm sure at a minimum, OCH will be proliferary, involved in the sense of we can't look at social housing really without involving OCH, since they are such a key player in the industry. But whether it's 100% an OCH audit, I'm not able to answer that at this time.
Is it looking at the registry at all?
Well, that's a great question. As you can see, the central waiting list is actually on our audit horizon. It was actually originally on the plan. I had a great discussion with Clara and her team, and they've been working quite a bit with the registry. So we've chosen to wait to see what those developments look like. But yes, it very, very well could involve looking at the wait list.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Any questions for staff? No, my general question is maybe just to the city manager. When you look at the plan, do you have any concerns about capacity for your staff to manage any of that?
No, we don't, Chair. We we worked with the Auditor General just in terms of having the conversations with respect to what was going to be looked at, and we agree with the work plan. We're comfortable.
Great. Thank you for that kind of collaboration where you do have to contemplate who might be overloaded, where you've just been, what departments have been, sick of being audited. Never. Some hands up over there. Okay, so no questions we have. So we just have the report recommendation, which is that the Audit Committee recommend Council approve the Office of the Auditor General's 2026-2027 audit work plan. Is this motion carried? Carried. All right, so now in camera. None. No items in camera. Notices of motion, anyone? Not that we know of. Inquiries? None that we see. Other business? Nothing. All right. So our next meeting is March the 31st of 2026. So we'll all have a nice long break. Not you, but not staff, but we will have a long break. And we will wish you all then a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. See you in March, and we are adjourned. Thank you.